You learn Spanish.
If I had time, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But you don't have a lot of time, I'm assuming, because you are the US CEO at MullenLowe. And yes, we are recording in person at the MullenLowe
For the
office.
first time.
First in-person recording in New York. It's incredible.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with us as we're setting up the sound and figuring this all out. I know you're a busy guy. So how are you doing today, sir?
So first off, the sir is throwing me off.
Oh, you don't like that?
It's like my dad. But today's great. It's we're fall. You're moving at the perfect time to New York. It's fall. It's the best weather. I think it's like everyone leaves the city during the summer. They go to the beaches, they go, the Hamptons. And now everyone comes back. It's football season, so the weather's nice. You're moving at a really good time.
Okay. Is September better to move in? September 1, or do you think October 1? Because we were debating this. What do you think would be a better month?
September, I think you're gonna get the full fall.
Yep.
The weather just broke. We'll probably get a couple more hot days, but
yeah, totally. So, Frank, what's going on here? You started at MullenLowe not too long ago. When did you become the US CEO?
Yeah, so I started in January.
Mhm.
So I think it was January 15th. But really I started getting probably like a little over a year ago. I got my first call from a woman who's, she's probably the best CEO in the industry. She's now retired.
Yep.
Her name was Kristen Cavallo.
Yep.
And she called me out of the blue. She had, and I thought the job was something totally different. I thought it was, I can't remember if it was, I thought it was LA or president or CEO of LA. And early on, she said, I don't know why do you keep talking about LA? This is for, MullenLowe US CEO. And there's 400 people and it's $100 million company. And I was like, okay, can I, do you mind if I talk to my wife and take a weekend and, and call you back? And then we can figure out if we're going to keep talking. So I had sent her, so then that following Monday, I sent her a text, and somehow the way I worded it, I think she thought I was not interested. So a couple weeks went by, and, we had some mutual client friends that were really kind of, they're the ones who recommended me for the job. So, she had told one of them, I don't think Frank's interested. And she's like, I think he is. I think you should call him back. And then that started the process of, really getting serious about, do I want to take this job? Why do they want me? What sort of skills? I wanted to make sure I'd be set up for success. Yeah. So what sort of skills are they looking for? Because from a creative background, it's like, there's so much more to CEO, which is the finances, the real estate, even people like those, you're dealing with people of all departments versus just one department. But they were really looking for, how do they push the creative here in a way and become a company that is all around creative? Because if that's our product, it doesn't make sense why more companies don't do it.
Got it. And before Mullen, you were at the community. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Tell me about the community, what you were doing there too.
So, I was chief creative officer at the community, and it was, that was one of the more fun times in agencies, I've worked at just throughout the past, mostly because it still had the founders there. So the founders were still involved, even though they were owned by publicists, or publicists, depending on, your pronunciation so it still had that kind of Miami kind of, culture, which was sort of like, it's a little more loose, a little more fun, a little more quirky. And you look at the work they've done in the past, and they've won every award you can win. It's all very fun and quirky, and it makes you laugh, and it's interesting. Everything has an interesting angle on it. So, the people as a result were the same. If you go to if I miss a lot of the people that I worked with because they were just fun. You go to a happy hour with them, they're dancing right as they walk into the room. When I go on the Zooms, everyone's speaking Spanish, and then it quickly switches to English.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool time in my career. And it was the first time as with the title of chief creative officer. So, but I was in New York, and so I went in, and we didn't have a lot of people or clients at the time, at least like the New York office. And I started in January, right before COVID.
Yeah.
So it was like 3 months in, and the world shut down, which, as you know, when you started the podcast in March, that's sort of when I was just kind of had met people, and I had flown down to Miami for the first time to meet that whole crew.
Right.
And then that was the March 1st date was I flew back, and by March 7th, the office was closed and we were fully remote.
Yeah. So how did you kind of adapt with the pandemic and being remote? So
every time that job let me kind of had a little bit of self-reflection of how I'm in this, how I got to where I did. That was probably the worst case scenario, but I found there's moments in my career when I can look back and see the best work I've done has been in a time when it's the worst possible scenario to do great work. Sort of like the kind of theory of the raccoon backed into a corner and they're going to fight their way out. Yeah. There's nothing else that's going to save you besides doing your best work in those moments. So that was one of those times where it was like, you just have to figure it out. And it's not going to present itself to you, because we had different clients. Like there was Lufthansa, we were doing projects for Corona. I think we had Norwegian Cruise Line. Like those were some of the clients. They all just went away overnight. Luckily, we also had Verizon as an anchor client.
Nice.
And they were actually amazing during the pandemic, and they really stood by their agencies. So that helped us kind of create a sense of sort of, I guess what's the word? Stability.
Sure.
For people and their lives outside, as you remember during the pandemic. It was crazy. It was like you didn't know what people were dealing with, what sort of, we had people pass away in our family, and then New York was the epicenter of when it came from Italy to New York.
Right.
So it was interesting even doing virtual between people in Miami, and we were like, there's freezer trucks outside of hospitals here, and they were fully open. So it was like there was even that dichotomy there where the New York crew was like going through it, and the Miami crew was a little more open. They got it a little later than us, but so that's where I just started dialing and figuring stuff out of like, the only way out of any problem, and this is probably a good lesson for the younger folks listening, is like, just do work, just do your best work. And it's like, that will solve 99% of advertising's problems. If you do consistent good work. So, what I did was this, I knew the clients we had in the building weren't going to do the things, because they were all focused on, they were scared too. They were focused on, what's our business going to be like? What's this? How do we, reassure people? Whereas, there was a client I previously had at Oreo and they were going through, a windfall. So like, while some companies were doing poorly in the pandemic, everyone's eating snacks and everyone's eating Oreos.
Right.
So they were having a good year and willing to take some swing, which I didn't know, but at the time before I reached out to them, but they're good friends from previous agencies. And, that's where I'll tell you a little behind the scenes. We did 2 rounds of work. So I said, I sent them a piece of work that I had done kind of proactively at the community. And, my client, Justin, the shout out to Justin and Marion, if they're listening, to 2 great clients. Justin said, when are you going to do this for us? And I said, send me a brief. So it really was that simple. It's just back and forth. They sent me a clear, simple brief. No one's having fun. How do people stay playful? And at the time, Oreo was, it was Trump was in office, and he was trying to shut down TikTok in the US. He said, someone has to buy it. So our first idea, we presented him 10 ideas, but the one they gravitated towards the first time was to make a formal, real, legal offer to buy TikTok with like 2 billion Oreos. And we were going to go down to Red Hook and hire someone to stand out there for 7 days while the Chinese came. Like we were going to offer people from China to come and sign the contract. But that was like, we can bring this into the Oreo offering. And we were like, let's play it really real. Let's play it real. Like it has to be legal. It has to be this. So it went through their system, and it's a political, controversial idea. I was like, it's a long shot but they all loved it. And it went to the, the head, I think the president of the US at the time, and it went to the legal. He loved it, then went to legal, and it kind of got shut down. They didn't go into exactly why it got shut down. However, you can know that why it got shut down. They probably didn't want to go anywhere near politics. So, and they also had a TikTok strategy and all that stuff. So they were like, let's pump the brakes on that one, but we really liked it. Right. And I got an email from the president, saying how much, he just wanted to let me know how much he enjoyed the idea, even though for reasons they can't go into, they're not going to do it. And I was like, that's really nice of him. That was really awesome of him to do that, because he didn't have to. And that's where most people don't have to do that. So then I asked him if he wants, it was relatively painless, and should we do one more round? So we did one more round, and that's where one of my favorite creatives I've ever worked with, his name is Fede. He still works at the community. He texted me an image of the vault with an Ohio on it, and I said I love it. And then I called him, and we started working it out. We presented that on a Friday.
Okay, give some context.
Okay,
the vault. For the listeners that don't know, everybody should go Google Oreo Doomsday Vault, so they're following along.
Yep.
But more context on the vault, and what did he show you?
Yeah, so he just showed me a picture of basically a worse version of the thumbnail on my website, or if you Google it, you can Google image. A worse version of that. It was blue. I didn't like the blue, but I liked I knew what they were going after, which is there's a seed vault in Svalbard, Norway, which all the countries send in case of an emergency. If an asteroid hits, for example, if there's a nuclear holocaust, it's really dark. So it's like every country sends their agriculture seeds, so that they can repopulate the earth with the crops in case there's a cataclysmic event like what happened to the dinosaurs. So while he sent me that, we also knew that there was an asteroid coming. So we knew there was an asteroid coming, and we knew that, there was also the presidential election right in the next month too. So it's this kind of storm of which is why it was an amazing brief to begin with, which is really no one's having fun this time. We're in the pandemic. There is an election coming. This asteroid did only have a 0.4% chance. There wasn't a major, let's say, threat. And that's why it was okay. But I presented it on a Friday. And I said to them, listen, we're not going to just do this how a lot of places would do it, which is let's Photoshop it and let's post it on Instagram. If we do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to go all in. And we have to send someone to Norway. We don't know how we're going to do it yet, because there is a 10-day quarantine. So we ended up doing that and presented on a Friday. I got a call from my friend who's still a client, at Marion, and she said, we want to do it, but you have to do it in Norway. And I said, great. And all right, shit, now I got to figure out how are we going to do this? There's 30 days to pull this off. Something insane like that. And there wasn't, because it was all based around an asteroid. We knew we didn't have a media buy that we could potentially push. We really had a hard date. So if anything went wrong, it's Jesus. So, so she said, go have at it. We linked up with this, with this director. His name's David Chaffee. And we talked to a bunch of people. We talked to, I think we talked to 3 or 4 directors. And, do you guys know this movie, Best in Show?
Mm-mm.
So, there's a really famous director, called Christopher Guest, and he directed movies like This Is Spinal Tap and Best in Show. And they're just, This Is Spinal Tap is they're all mockumentaries. One is about a rock band. Another one's about people who take their dogs to dog shows.
Okay.
And so he's one of the greats.
Yeah.
And funny enough, my mom is actually a huge fan of his. So I had to tell her, we're not going to Christopher Guest. We have an opportunity to shoot with him. We're not going to go. He wants to shoot in Los Angeles. But we have to do it authentically. So she was a little bit mad at me. But the person we went with actually ended up being the right person. Like it's just how sometimes things work out. So this guy, David Chaffee, he owns a production company called World War Seven. He does commercials. I just saw recently he's going into feature length. They're about to release a new movie, I guess, which sort of like, this kind of falls into that world. So he jumped in. We had an editor, Nick Divers. I brought in obviously with people at the agency, I brought in another friend who's an amazing writer, Ian Reichenthal. And we had like the premise of this thing. So we knew we had a month. We could work on the script while we actually prepped production. We sent, so that week it got greenlit. We had our producer and David Chaffee in Norway. So they had to do like 10 days in Oslo. And they were building like the little set designs you see in the film. So the little fake vaults we had while that was going, we had concrete going on a ship because there's a once a month ship to this. It's a really remote island right next to the North Pole. So it's this Svalbard is that. So you have to get all your stuff in, and we're learning as we go. Like we're learning like there's only one ship to get these concrete slabs in. So we have to build this. We have to build a vault there. And the light is low because it's like one of those places where, sometimes I think it's like 24 hours of darkness. So there's like 4 hours to shoot. Like, and then we needed the person to star in it. And it was a mockumentary. It was a mockumentary. So everyone really thought it was all real and played real and stuff like that. But we had this guy from a Netflix show. I forget what the show is called. It's super funny. Is basically the show he was in was sort of like a funny version of Vikings, where it was like, what if, the premise of that show is, what would Vikings be like in their real life? As if they were like, he wants to go pillage a village, but his wife set up a dinner date with a friend. So like those were the types of things that like, it sort of felt like modern day, like he still has to deal with like the, a double date with his wife over pillaging of another village. So he was super funny and he was all in. And then the night before the shoot, he backed out. And because his agent came in and was like, we want more money. So I had to call the client for a little bit more money to get him. But, and then the ship with the concrete came in super late. So there's things they didn't even tell me about, there's more polar bears on the island than people. But everything that happened along the way then went into the script. So we tried to make it as real as possible. So like more polar bears than people. All right, if we see a polar bear, that's going in the thing. If, the original seed vault, we got someone to sign paperwork that we could build this right next door. Like 2 days before the shoot, they were like, no, that person has no jurisdiction. You can't build this right next door. So we're like, then we build it down the road and we wrote it into the script. And there's a scene in there where he's like, we were going to build it here, but there's not even a parking lot here. And this place is a little played out anyways. So we're going down the road. So that's how that all came together. And then that kind of blew up as soon as we put it out there. And then, that became like a big part of our community, our new business strategy. Cause then the phone started ringing for the right reasons. Right. So that Oreo turned into our Netflix friends, calling and wanting to do a project together, which you can kind of see where this is going. And then, the Netflix turned into, we did a thing with Tanqueray and Bridgerton and that turned into a relationship with Diageo and who has Tanqueray. And we did other projects for like Captain Morgan and stuff. So you can see how it started and we started growing, the agency in the way that we wanted to, which was through the work.
I love it. What I wanted to bring up was if you didn't push when they were going with TikTok and their Oreo is going to try to buy TikTok and you could have gave up right there.
Yeah.
And you could have called it taken the easy path and then think about like the butterfly effect if you didn't push to do the Doomsday Vault, which then went to Netflix and GM, right? Which then went to the Oreo Thins, I'm assuming, or in some sort of that progression there. So it's a really important lesson to the aspiring advertisers and really everybody in this industry is perhaps not to give up if something dies.
Yeah. I mean, everything's going to die. Every great thing's going to die a few times.
Right.
At minimum one. And and you need to figure out your way. I think that's what we can talk about, just creatives for a second.
Yeah, do it.
To me, it's now I'm banging on the table.
All good.
To me, the thing that separates a good creative from a great creative is not the ability to come up with ideas. It's that after you have the idea, how do you still make it better than when you started? Because people are, there's legal hurdles that are going to come up. There is, the client feedback. There's figuring it out. And how do you turn that into something great? And that's what I look for in creatives, is the people who are willing to embrace the possible negatives or the possible fact that like this died or whatever, and not keep trying to make things better or make it. So in the case of the TikTok idea, it's like, well, we can do something even better then. So it's like, it's a little bit having a positive attitude, and how do you make this work for you? So I think that's the bigger piece there, is like, yes, it's the relentless ones. If you're going to throw a guardrail up in front of me, I'm going to figure, if I can't run through it, I'm going to figure out a way around it.
Right. I was going to ask you then, so then how do you know when to, in this case, for the TikTok situation, it was legal.
Yeah.
Can't finagle legal too much.
Yeah. That was dead.
Yeah. And I guess then that's a clear, you have to pivot moment there. Yeah. How do you determine that? Like, if I'm a young creative, like, and I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until the creative director says, all right, can it?
Yeah. I mean, no. I think that it's a case by case basis, but that will be like more of an experience thing when you start to understand.
Yeah.
You have a relationship with your clients and you understand the nuance of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know when you can push and you know when you can't push, and it's time to pivot or try to figure out something new. So, and that's a two-way street. That can be, they could give you feedback that, you have to change the idea so much you've lost the original intention of the idea. In that case, you have to have a relationship with them that you can say, listen, this isn't going to work anymore. Like, we can no longer stand behind this. So they can kill it, but you can also kill it too. And when you kill it, you need to come back with something equal or better.
Right.
And be able to articulate why you don't think it's going to work and they're going to waste money. So I think it's more of you have to be a little bit relentless, but also cautiously relentless, where I think some creatives get into the habit of they're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and kind of forcing an idea down a client's throat. And that doesn't work either. It's really like you have to understand the nuances and how to work with the client and find their threshold for when is it time to pull the plug, or when is it the time where they're just giving feedback and you need to address it.
But is this the job of the young creative, or is this the account team in the earlier stages?
So I think it used to be, this is my theory. This is my opinion. I think it's everybody's job now. And this is what we're doing at MullenLowe now. I think it used to be just on the account team. It used to be just on the account team to do that.
Right.
But me and I hired this great ECD. He's about to make a big announcement today at the community. And we started this thing we called Creative Client Services at the community.
Nice.
And Creative Client Services was the expectation that not every creative, so the younger ones don't have to have a relationship with the clients, but everyone who's client facing at some level needs to develop a relationship with the client in order to understand, what are their fears? What are their wants? What does their boss want? Because that will help you understand what types of ideas to put in front of them. So for example, if you understand their organization and say, I won't use names, but this happened to us recently, which is like their tech, they are very focused on sales, and their tech, we had a bunch of tech ideas that we had to use a little bit of their inside infrastructure technology wise and change some things. They were never going to do that. Are you trying to guess? You're looking at the website.
I'm going to find out.
So they're trying to guess, we were putting another thing on their plate.
Sure.
So then instead of that, we're just like, all right, those types of tech ideas now at the time being are off the table, and we're going to have to come with ideas that kind of circumvent anything that's going to put added pressure on them. So that's where that's where the creatives can really help, because it used to be, you present an idea and then the account team goes into a phone call or room with the client and is like, and then gets the feedback, and then it's the telephone game translates. It's not fair for anyone.
Right.
Whereas like to me, the strategy and the account team and creatives have to really own that relationship together. Now, do I want our creatives to be talking finances with the client? No. Do I want the account team to talk creative executions with the client?
Yeah, start concepts.
So everybody has their own lane, but it's like really creating this team who's servicing the client and trying to solve their actual business problems versus, so it's a little bit of a pivot, I would say, on what a traditional creative or strategist or account person was expected to do.
Got it. I like that. Can we kick it back to when you decided that you wanted to make ads for a living, how you broke into this business?
Yeah. So I had no idea. Like I didn't really, it was before Mad Men, it was before Mad Men came out. And that changed a lot. But so I was in college and I was having, I was kind of coming up to my graduation, probably trying to delay tactics a little bit, but I went to UMass, and I had a marketing, so it was like sort of more business focused. I have a business degree, and then a minor in English. So I was like, I liked writing. That was creative writing was my favorite, but I hadn't put the pieces together yet. And when we were about to graduate, a weird thing happened where my teacher was like, you should go to Ad Age. I was like, what's Ad Age? And so she's like, well, it's a website for marketing. So I go to Ad Age, and the first article or the second article, which if you've been to Ad Age, this doesn't happen. You get like, you can't find what you want to find to begin with. If you're looking for something, the second article was this thing that this guy, David Register, was starting a creative ad school in Arnold in Boston, which is 45 minutes from where I lived. It was a 4-week course. So it was just like, really, it's like, here's what advertising is a little bit. And he's going to give you some assignments. And it was like $800. I remember it was $800 for this 4-week course. So I was like, oh, so I called my parents and I was like, hey, I know I'm graduating. I know I already took an extra semester to take an English minor. Feels like I'm dragging this out a little bit longer than I need to. Now I am, I'm ready to, I want to do this advertising school called Option R. And they were like, you know what? We'll give him the money, because I was broke. We'll give him the money and he'll get it out of the system. So before I took the course, I went on, I had no idea what I was doing. So I went on Amazon. I started buying books. I bought this book called Creative Advertising, which kind of went through these different campaigns and all these different tactics of how to come up with ideas. And I really realized that, like, the ideas were the exciting part to me. So, and then I started buying some old award show annuals at like advice from a friend. And then I started the class, and I didn't know what I was doing. The first class was like, does everybody know what a copywriter and art director is? And the reality was most of those people were working in the industry. They were working at Arnold, either in the studio or they were juniors and they were trying to develop their books more. So they developed their portfolios. So I didn't say anything because I was a little embarrassed that I didn't know what a copywriter or art director was. So he's like, I'm going to explain it anyways, just in case nobody knows. I'm like, thank you. Yeah. And he explained what an art director was, explained what a copywriter was. So I was like, yeah, a copywriter seems more, I don't know how to use Photoshop. So I'm going to go copywriting. So he started giving us assignments and I was all in. I stopped, my friends would go out on the weekends. I stopped doing that. I started just focusing. Really, I gave myself the job before I got the job. So I was working 9 to 6, just coming up with these fake ads, drawing sketches,
spec work. Yeah.
Spec work. Then I would go into the class with like 30 ideas,
right?
Like each time. And nobody had told me to come up with 30 ideas, but now, I'll tell teams come up with as many things as you can.
Yep. The proliferation exercise.
Yep. And he would pull out either nuggets or he would say, this is great, or this is horrible. And that was like, so I did that for 4 weeks. And then I was ready to take the second course, which was like step 2.
Yep.
And then he had a back surgery. So there's a big gap between between the two. And, he's in a lot of pain too. So it was like, so then I got a little frustrated because I had these sketches. He had paired me with an art director for some of these. But like they had a full-time job and I didn't. So I wasn't ready to wait.
Right.
So then I decided, then I said to my parents, I need a camera. I'm like, I downloaded this, bootleg version of Photoshop and I learned it. I got I got a book off Amazon.
Yeah.
Like a little CD-ROM of like, here's how to do this. And I'm like, now I need to come up with ideas that I can make myself. So like, I know that if it's heavy Photoshop or heavy this, if I can set up most of it and color correct it and like maybe change a little bit, manipulate, put a logo on, I have a much better chance of building my portfolio. So that's what I spent my time doing. I was, and I started emailing the back and forth with the instructor. He's probably recovering.
He's like in a lot of back pains.
Yeah.
Nobody bother me. And
he actually at one point told me that I needed to chill out because I was emailing him ideas every day.
But that's a good sign though.
Well,
that means you're passionate.
I was kind of like, yes, I didn't know that. I was just, at the time, I was just like, oh, I'm so sorry. This was not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So, but I loved it. And I was like, I can't believe if I'm lucky enough to have a moment where I can get this job. So then I took the second course and I got to the point where I made my portfolio. We also had this thing, they still have it in New England called the New England Hatch Awards. It's like sort of like a local version of the one show.
Sure.
It's a regional award show. But it's a big deal. Everybody gets a book at the end and all the ads are printed in there. So I decided to enter some student awards. And I remember, printing them on my parents' computer. So like, again, I had no idea what I was doing. So I'm printing them and they're all coming out. They're wet. So they're like rippled. It's like the worst possible presentation. And I put like 10 ads, like a few different campaigns, sent them off. And, I ended up winning a lot of stuff.
There we go.
And in hindsight, I looked at how some of the other students were presenting their work. I'm like, I shouldn't have won anything. Theirs is like beautiful. But what was cool was at least at that time, the jury was like, this is a student and we're focused on the ideas and these ideas are good. So we're going to reward this.
Right.
So that's how then my work made it on the desk of everyone in Boston.
Nice.
So it was like, then when I went and started going into interviews, my first interview, I honestly don't remember the creative director's name. It did leave a bad taste in my mouth, but I've since forgiven him, even though I don't know who he is. I went in with like, those like binders you have like baseball cards in?
Yes. Yeah.
So I went to Staples and I bought one of those with like plastic sleeves with the wet, like crumpled up or like rippled printouts.
Yeah.
And that was my first portfolio. And this guy was like, you have to like, this is a really terrible looking portfolio. And I just remember in my head being like, well, I think he should be focused on the ideas. I don't remember if I got offered the job or not, but I wouldn't have taken it. Because I remember he was focused on the wrong things. And he was focused on this presentation, which could be taught, and not the fact that you can come up with ideas, which is a lot harder to teach.
Right.
Or understand why it looks like this or what. Mm-hmm. And the reality is like, I didn't know anything. I was mostly self-taught, taught by advertising award shows. And I'd spent the last 8 months putting together what, the competition was people 2 years in ad school. So it's like, that to me was a better thing to focus on, especially like thinking back now, than the fact that the presentation as a writer wasn't great. If it was an art director, I'd be like, yeah,
of course.
So
this is important stuff here because we're kind of facing this today with portfolio schools that are still around.
Yep.
They even offer master's degrees, some of them. Now, now that you're the CEO and you're in charge of hiring, I'm sure you look at some of the books that come in for, all positions, is it more important to look for the ideas and the potential, or is it more important to find that fully crafted, they're well balanced, they can execute right away? Because the speed of the industry, as we know, is, we have to be faster.
Yep.
So being able to execute, do you think those expectations have changed?
Well, I think what the ad schools, which by the way, I think are amazing. And I don't recommend people to take my path now because I think there's so much more. And to the Mad Men comment earlier, I think that show really changed the industry because it got it on the map. And
Yeah, it's
like,
why I wanted to join. Yeah.
So it got a lot more people coming in. So the ad schools are doing a really good job of getting people ready on day one. And I think like now money's tighter, timeline's tighter. You know, I think you should be prepared to have ideas on day one. I had ideas. I didn't have craft. I didn't have anything like that. You know, I remember having to write headlines for this Chili's Guiltless Grill, and I failed like my first assignment, which was because it was like still like 800 calories, but it was called a Guiltless Grill, and I was like, that's not totally guiltless.
Right.
So I was like struggling figuring out how to wordsmith it in a way that it was like.
But you didn't necessarily believe it. So
I think that's
too.
That was another thing. But so it's like I wasn't fully ready to come in. Like on day one, but they did see my hunger, and I would look for that too. I look for potential. I look for all we have is like in this industry are the people and our brains. That's really what it is. So I look for people who kind of can figure out how to go through those portfolio schools and take a less formulaic approach.
Yeah.
So if you can make me as a student, I feel like if you can make me laugh with a print ad, I will hire you in a second.
Nice.
So it's like, you know, I remember this student, he came with an ad for bread.
Okay.
He came with it, and I'm like, what a bold move. What a bold move to come up like as a student with an idea for bread. And I think his tagline was, party like the Old Testament. And I was like, this is amazing. So it was like I look for things like that where it's like, how do you take on even if the ad's not right, how do you take on a problem in an interesting way? If you can make me laugh, that's the hardest thing to do as a student.
Yep.
I think when I say formulaic approach, it's like there's a lot of case studies. So it's like, you know, when they get to the part of the case study, when you know it's fake and it's like, and everyone went crazy, the whole world, you know, went crazy. It's like, you don't need that. It's like, I would put together something like, smart, interesting that I can understand and align. Like, I think like what I do is I go to the idea write up.
Yeah.
I go to thumbnail, idea write up. Mm-hmm. If that is an idea that I think is interesting, then I'll play your video. But that's sort of like, you know, I would go the opposite. I would have like some really great print ads in my book, showing off my craft, whether it's writing or art direction, showing that. And then you can go into, and then here's some bigger thoughts too. Something to get you in, because we don't have time anymore. Like especially the hiring managers, not just me, like the creative directors, they're under the gun on these clients. They're trying to deliver for their clients. They don't have time to go through all your entire portfolio. So it's more like, how do you get the point across really quickly? If you do that and they like something, they're going to be like, all right, that unlocks to dive deeper. But it's really those like first 1, 2, 3 are really important to get that idea across very simply. Have something interesting, provide a unique point of view, make the person laugh, make the person think, show you're curious, find a problem that people, I'll give students like a free one now because I haven't figured it out. Like find an interesting problem. We found out that, you know, or a team found out that, the statue of David in Rome, he has a vein on his neck that's bulging. And a cardiologist went and he said, that's a sign that he has heart failure. So I think it was Da Vinci, right? Did Da Vinci do that on purpose? Did he know? Did he make the perfect man with one flaw? So it's like, how do you pair that with a heart charity to then come up with an idea? So like, that's another thing I'm looking for is like curiosity. How do you think? Do you have entrepreneurship? Did you what sort of adversity did you come over in your looking for to create your portfolio in order to make it?
And what was that first agency that you broke into?
So that was called Hill Holiday. So Hill Holiday was, I thought this was the pinnacle. I don't know if I'll ever be happier I'll be happier in different ways. But in my career, as I was when I got the call that I got that job for $40,000, I was like, I cannot believe that somebody's willing to pay me this amount of money. And they have this office. I think it was on like the 35th floor. It's beautiful. It's overlooking Boston. I'm like, I saw the building. I would like point it out to friends. I'm like, that's where I work. I was so proud.
Right. Right.
But then I had to figure out, how do I stay?
Yeah.
Like yeah. Great. So on day one.
Wait, how did you get in there though? Did you send your portfolio?
Yeah, it's just, I think I found the hiring manager,
on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Something.
Was it on LinkedIn?
LinkedIn was around.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was the early days. You know what? I can't fully remember.
Sure.
How. But it definitely was like, it probably was as simple as going to the website and the hiring manager's name is listed.
But then, everybody else has access to that. So how do you stand out?
Yeah.
What'd you do? Was it just your book? Like, did you email it to them?
And
did you email it to them?
Well, before I answer that part was confusing, like let's call it the discovery phase of agencies.
Yeah.
Which like I really, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know who was doing the good work. And people in a portfolio school have a little bit of guidance. They know, they understand. But I was like, oh, Ogilvy, I've heard of that before. So I'm going to go to Ogilvy's website, but then you can't tell. To me, it was like confusing because I'm like, well, they have like 1 billion offices, but then like they have this work that's all amazing, but where's it coming from?
Right.
So you have to figure out that too. That's another thing with like all these agencies merging with each other. And it's like, where's the work coming from in these big networks that you need to find that pocket of where you want to work?
And the people, I would argue, it's like, I want to know which people made it, like which creatives were behind that work.
Yeah.
And where are they now?
Yeah.
Because people move around quickly too. So I would even try to find the individuals that you aspire to be like.
Yeah.
And follow them.
Yeah. You have to, I learned that later.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that later. Right now, I was like, I just want to get into the door.
You get the name.
So I got I got the interview.
Yeah.
And, I was excited. I was like, I think that when you talk to someone, when I talk about ads still, I get really excited, which you'll probably find.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was the same then. I was like, I just wanted to talk about ads. And like, if someone would tell me that they didn't like something, I would go back and I revise it. And it's like, so and I would revise, not in a job tactic, but then I would email them. And I think as I interviewed like 3 or 4 people, with like 3 or 4 people at Hill.
Yeah.
And the person I ended up working for was this guy. His name was Tim Colley. And he was, and I worked with a lot of people, but really he was my direct boss. And he was running the Dunkin' Donuts account. And so that was like, to this day, that billboard that's icy, not pricey. My family still, for iced coffees, my family still brings that up as like, oh, what about icy, not pricey?
Yeah.
And they have one of my out of home. It was like a airplane billboard where I wrote like, it was going around the beaches. It still goes around now. Long Island. It was going around this summer. It just says, "You look hot down there," with an iced coffee. So it was like
incredible. That
job, because I had to write all of the signage in the store, and I had to write a ton of radio. It was like a retail client. So that's one thing I think would be interesting for if you're like unsure of your craft or skills, is like trying to get yourself into a situation like that where it's just repetition. So I was just writing nonstop, whether it was headlines, and I would try to write these. If you go by one of these stores now, you're like, why would he? You end up with something like the holy grail of breakfast sandwiches. But I was writing every time I went in to write the best headline.
Right.
And I was like, I'd show up with like 7 pages of headlines, like, probably double space. But I think that's what, afterwards, my boss was like, he did say like, I would beat people in assignments because I just didn't know any better. And I was just like, I didn't know it was good or was bad. So I'm just going to go like, I can't self-filter. So I'm going to show you all my work. And then as you go, you have to start self-filtering. But
that's important because it's not your job when you're starting off as a copywriter or art director to know, potentially that's really up to the creative director to be able to spot what's a good idea and pick it out of the proliferation that you've created and then expand upon that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say for young people too, is like, even if you think, I wouldn't be so, confident that I knew the answer. And especially if I put myself in situations with the right people, I always was terrified to present to my boss. And I was like, I'd be shaking. I'd be like, presenting these things and just like, I could get kicked out now. Like I could get kicked out of the industry now because what I'm about to show is so bad. And then they would find the nuggets and find the good in there. And as you do that, you start to learn your boss's taste. And all right, so now I can start to kind of hone in on that. I think that's where the first years of your career, you don't know what your voice is yet. You don't know what you're interested in yet. So try to pick people, either your boss who you respect or somebody else in the industry who you admire. Try to make an ad like that person would make an ad.
Love that. I remember I had a boss, we would go away. He would state a problem, and then we would go away. We'd both write down, like 3 sheets of paper. And he told me, he's like, just name, like, we're going to go one by one. Like you'll go first. You'll put all of your ideas. You'll say them out loud. And I was like, okay, I really like this one. He's like, stop there. Like just list them all out and we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
So thought that was an interesting exercise. And then he listed them all out too. And then we talked about it.
Yeah. Another important thing that happened at Hale Holiday was my first week was a really big round of layoffs. And I think that,
that'll shape you. That'll either scare you out or make you tough, right?
Yeah. So I think like that was very eye-opening because I thought I was getting fired within 3 days I was in the industry.
Yeah.
And then even flash forward to now, I don't know if it was when I was talking about this job or even recently. I talk to Kristen all the time. She asked me like, what drives me? And I said, that drives me, getting kicked out of the industry. That's the thing that was terrifying because it was sort of like from then on, I didn't decorate my desk. I always had my portfolio up to date. I was never caught like, I'm never going to be caught in a situation where I'm not ready to take the next thing. And I had no fear, and I still have no fear of getting fired because I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. And that's the thing that I'm going to try to do the best work no matter what, even at risk of putting my job on the line, is sort of where that all comes from that time of, I'm sure if I was doing therapy, they would be, they would pull it back to there. But it was, I was like, I'm getting kicked out and then I'm going to have to go get a job in like, I don't know, am I going to do finance? I don't really like finance.
My backup thing is I can do construction. I'll figure it out.
I can do landscaping.
I have that same drive too. That similar thing happened to me really early on in my career. And it kind of scarred me a little bit. It scared me.
Yeah. You know what? I have a theory too. You said you did construction. I did landscaping all throughout college. I was building like patios and walkways and that sort of stuff. And it's like in digging holes in like 105-degree heat. That's when I look at like our jobs are, they're stressful because we're dealing with clients and money.
Right.
And we're dealing with deadlines and we're dealing with that. But they're not like hard like that.
No.
Like, the person, I remember like, working late in Boston and you drive your car in and then you at 11 o'clock you drive out and you're feeling really down about yourself. There's a person collecting the ticket and he's got a family to support and he's just collecting tickets and collecting money for the parking garage. Like that's a hard job versus what we do is we get to come to work and have fun and
come up with ideas for a living.
Yeah. Which is the most, it's probably one of the more fun jobs in the world. So that was a formative experience, the layoffs then. But I worked there for 2 or 3 years and I got some shots at like some TV scripts. What was interesting when I first, when I couldn't visualize it in my head of how like it was going to work. And I'd gone from radio to TV. So there was like some things I was still finding out on the set is like, how is this person going to enter the scene? I couldn't figure it out in my head because I'd never seen it done I don't know. It just broke my brain at the time. And then I got on set. I'm like, oh yeah, he just walks in. But you get to that first set and there's like 50, 60 people. It was in New York. The street was shut down. I was like, oh, well, maybe I did get the right. They sent me down here for just one day. Like they couldn't afford me to go down, but they're like, you can go for one day. I stayed with my girlfriend at the time. I didn't have Like they literally just paid for my plane ticket.
Incredible. Got it. So we covered a lot here. I think, is there anything else in your career or maybe with MullenLowe today that you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Final advice. I'll let you take it over.
Yeah. So I think, right now at Mullen, what I think was interesting was just my first two jobs were Hill Holiday and Arnold. And when you're working in Boston, that is what you would call one stop shy of the circuit. So the circuit being Hill Holiday, Arnold, and Mullen. And people go, because it's a small town, they do that. They go to the three, and I never thought I would go to the three. So, but Mullen is the agency that I admired probably the most, that I didn't work for in as far as Boston goes. I knew all the work. So starting from, the famous Super Bowl commercial when I grew up from Monster.com, all the way coming into like the E-Trade work with, Don't Get Mad, Get E-Trade, where there's a commercial with somebody who has a boat and has a yacht party, and it's like the dumbest guy in your class, your high school just bought a yacht. Don't get mad, get E-Trade.
I love that.
They were always coming up, and even like there's this thing called the world's hardest job, and it was it was for American Greetings, a greeting card company, and they did a fake interview for basically the hardest job, and they took all these things that moms do. It's 24/7. You're going to have to clean up poop. You're going to have to do all this. You're going to be on call. Your boss might call you at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And these people were like, this sounds like a nightmare. No, I'm not taking this job. They're like, well, this is the job of a mother, and it's for Mother's Day. So these things that really played big in culture, that is where we're going back to with Mullen, is how do we make the big noise that we have such a history of taking these things, whether it was like Royal Caribbean or all this work for JetBlue. We did amazing work for JetBlue. And it's sort of like, a lot of agencies, they go through transformation periods. I think this is not a small transformation, but because we have the talent, we have the people, and it's just sort of like, I think agencies during the pandemic and stuff, they sort of, got maybe in their own way a little bit. I was listening to the podcast of the old Chipotle CMO or CEO who's now at Starbucks. And he said like he came in and they didn't have chips. Like there's restaurants who are running out of chips. And he's like, that's a pandemic thing. So now what we're doing is we're sort of going back to basics. And that means the basics of the client relationship, the basics of why we're here. We're here to make the best work in the world. We are here to compete with the best agencies in the world. And that's where we have a lot of clients who are on board and in progress of making really, really great things. And, it'll probably be, I would say, towards the end of the year into next year, we'll start to see some signs of I would say greatness. But we have things like that we're building on. We just launched our MullenLowe Design Studio.
Love it.
So the design studio is the most talented group of designers at any agency that I've worked at.
It's so nice.
And I'm not saying I got a really good friend. His name is Brian Gartside. That's nothing against you, Brian Gartside, but you're a team of very few. This is a big, legitimate team that we obviously they did this logo, but they're doing a full rebrand for another one of our clients now. They're doing work for all sorts of things. They're doing I won't say the award show name, but they're doing the call for entries for this award show, and they're showing me stuff as they go, and it's unbelievable. Everything they touch to me turns to gold. Is like we launched with I said, can you guys make a video for the announcement of our design studio? They show it to me and like, good, oh, let's do it. I put it on LinkedIn. It was like, awesome. It went like viral
with the printout.
Yeah. I can see the number of views. I'm like, this is insane. I think it was like 70,000 views, something crazy like that.
It was incredible.
Yeah. So it's just like they used to be art directors, the two guys leading it. One's nice. Fabio, one's Joao.
So that's some of that concepting capability.
So everything's everything's idea based. So
Right.
this you'll see in the back is for people listening, it's our company logo, which is an octopus. And there's a reason for that. Octopus is all about adaptability and change and challenging. So it's the only organism to self-edit its own DNA, which means it's why you see this show up in every time you see it, it's different. It morphs.
Love it.
Every person here can make their own. The clients can make their own. So what it is like they self-edit their own DNA and they adapt. It's one of the oldest living organisms in the world before dinosaurs and stuff. So that's what Mullen does best, which is this adaptability of what are we doing to future-proof ourselves as an agency? What are we doing? How are we getting into AI? How are we challenging ourselves to come up with interesting new ideas? How are we reframing briefs? Instead of waiting for briefs to come, how are we not talking to the agents or our clients and telling them what's scaring them? What's the business challenges? What sort of things that can we come back, write a brief for, and really solve their business problems. I won't name the name of the brand, but I'll give you an example of this, which is we had a candy brand, which was you'll probably be able to put it together, but it's a gummy candy that's sour on the outside. So they had a manufacturing problem where 50-pound balls of this gelatin was coming through, like the gummy,
Mm-hmm.
the gummy bear portion, and the sour portion was a sour powder and sugar they had all these things left over. So they were like, how do we have 50-pound balls of this. It wasn't a brief, but we came back and we said, why don't you repackage the sour sugar, throw the other stuff out, repackage the sour sugar, sell it in movie theaters as a popcorn topping. So it's like, those are the things that I think are the future of advertising agencies, where we can bring real value to our clients in the sense of, let's talk to them more. Let's understand what's keeping them up at night. Let's understand, you're an alcohol manufacturer and you've lost 30,000 bottles. What do you do? How do you turn that into a positive? How do you make it not a negative thing for your company, but rather a positive thing? Or you have a French fry shortage. I'm just going to give you have a French fry shortage. How do you make that to be a thing where it's like, it becomes a scavenger hunt around the world to find the French fries versus you can't put them in all the stores, but you put them in some and you make it a game for people to,
right.
So I think there's a lot of ways we can solve client strategic and business problems as agencies. And sometimes they look at us very simply, like, you're going to do our TV commercials and that's what you do. So what I like to do, to also get your clients to see you differently, is solve those business problems, because once you show up with that, and then the answer is not going to be a TV spot, or the answer is not going to be a social post. It's going to be something like the sour popcorn example,
right.
Where they start to see you in a different light, that your brain is around solving their problems. They also see you as more of a partner. So that's the mission here. The agency's philosophy is, being a challenger agency. And what that means is, like, kind of the things I told you about, like even me breaking in. And I've always gone to agencies that have more of need a creative lift, where they've sort of haven't figured out how do they make work when they've been stuck in this hole. So that's what this challenger agency I love, because it's like, we're going to hire people with a chip on their shoulder. We're going to hire people who believe their best work is in front of them and not behind them. We're going to hire people who are really entrepreneurial, where they're going to come to me with things. There's a guy who sits right out here. He literally will stop me every single time he sees me. He's always on my calendar. I have to kick him off my calendar. His name is Christian. He's, yesterday he's like, this sports team is looking, we don't have this sports team as a client, but he's talking to them. This sports team's looking for a vodka partner, or this person, here's a podcast that we can do something cool with, or here's this. He has unlimited ideas. What's that?
Where's he at?
We can't see him right now. I can't see him right now.
Should we call him in? See what ideas?
If I see him, I'll call him in.
Okay.
Maybe he has some ideas of how to grow the podcast.
Yeah. I want to see. But then talk to Christian. So
that's the philosophy at Mullen. It's around innovation, which is adaptation and change, which is the octopus, and then also kind of going back to basics and, like, what are we here for? We're here to solve clients' business problems. They don't have all the answers, and they don't know all the answers to ask us. So the idea is I like to develop a relationship with them, have them, have lots of meetings, get them talking about the business, bring us in a little bit more.
Love it. Anything else? Any other advice you have?
I think there's one thing we didn't talk about, which is in depth, which is people and following people. We talked about it a little bit, but when I moved from Boston to New York, I met two people who I ended up working at every job with for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think you see it a little bit in like Martin Scorsese movies. You see it in Adam Sandler movies. Despite what you think of Adam Sandler movies, they're working, they're selling, but they have the same crew that they move with. So that's one thing is like, the two names cause you should look up to is one is Sam Shepard, and now he's Chief Creative Officer of Uncommon New York, who's doing amazing work. And, Menno Kluwen, he'll get mad at me because I've never been able to pronounce his last name correctly. He's about to take another job, but, we just clicked, and it was like this sort of, it was interesting because we were able to go at, we were able to go into the agencies knowing that you have two people in different places kind of singing from the same song sheet. We were so aligned, and so we liked the same things. Menno pushed us very into craft, which is like, that's where we paired the idea and craft together. And we are actually working for a different boss at DDB when we came up with, that project that you asked about earlier, which was #Killer. And that was my first big project in advertising because we paired an idea with craft. And from then on, he kind of grabbed us and he's like, "You're working for me now." And then he would go, he would invite us to breakfast about, every 3 or 4 years. And we're like, well, we know he's quitting. And we know and so the first time he did it, it was actually scary, but he asked us to come with him to, another agency. We were like, yeah.
Oh, so he kept you two along.
Yeah. We didn't ask any questions either. We didn't ask about money. We actually took a salary demotion, and it was coming off some of the best work. We had done some of the most awarded work in the world. And we then took, an equal salary and a smaller title, which I know seems crazy. And it seems like, if you're not in the if you need money, you can't do that.
Sure.
But I was able to do it because I didn't have kids yet, and I didn't need the money, as much. I was still probably living paycheck to paycheck, but it was like, I was able to just say yes. And just like, he's going to guide us, and and we developed over the years to be more of a partnership, even though he was always technically our boss. And, it was way more of a partnership and a collaboration. And we just liked each other. We liked to make great work together, and we all had similar sensibilities.
Yeah. I see he's at Ogilvy and Sam's at Uncommon.
Well, he's not at Ogilvy right now.
Got it.
He's taking a new job.
Cool.
Probably in September.
Nice. September right now.
Did we do enough? Do you need more?
No, this is great. How can people reach out to you if they have any questions or if that's allowed?
It is. My email address is my name, frank.cartagena@MullenLowe.com. So very simple.
There we go.
But feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, reach out on email. If you don't hear from me, that is not about you. That is about me. My inbox is very full. My LinkedIn is full of people trying to sell me things. It just means, I've likely seen it, but then gotten distracted and just
they can follow up with me,
but they can send a follow up to me too.
Yeah.
And usually, don't feel that's the other thing is like, when you're breaking in, don't take no for an answer on the first email. Is like follow up again, and then give it a minute, follow up again. I know you're busy. And usually it's, someone will feel bad enough to write back.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to see how many times I had to follow up with you.
I think you were quick.
Yeah. Well,
you caught me at a moment where I was on there probably. What is it? No. Oh, it's the same day. Maybe I was on a plane.
Appreciate that.
All right. Good luck with everything, guys.
Frank, great interview. Love it.